Thank you for joining us. The meeting will begin shortly. If you are having technical difficulties, please contact WebEx Help at 866-229-3239. Thank you. We are just giving a little more time for some people to log on. We will begin the presentation at 5:05. Thank you. Sorry, that was 6:05 p.m. All right, thank you for joining us, everyone. Please note this public meeting is being recorded. Please keep your cameras turned off and yourself muted for the duration of the presentation. Tonight, we look forward to sharing information with you about the project, responding to your questions, and listening to your comments. After the presentation, we'll provide instructions on how you could submit comments or ask questions to the study team. Participants joining us via their computers on WebEx or through their phones are currently muted. I'll describe the meeting format and how to participate in just a moment. But first, if you are having any technical issues right now, you may need to hang up or log off, then redial or reconnect. If that does not work, please contact WebEx Help at 866-229-3239. Again, that number is 866-229-3239. We're looking forward to your comments and questions. After the presentation, we'll describe and display instructions for asking a question or providing comments. The format for tonight is a short presentation, then the remainder of the meeting will be open to the Q&A portion of the meeting. Please note this event is being recorded. If you need closed captioning, please click the C button in the bottom left corner of your screen to turn it on. Now I will hand it over to the City of Albuquerque Project Manager, Bridget Garrett, to begin the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Bryce. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the San Pedro Widening public meeting. As Bryce said, I am the project manager for this project with the Department of Municipal Development in the engineering division. Our engineering division manager, Paula Dodge Kwan, is also assisting with this project. However, she was unavailable to make the meeting this evening. And we have HDR Engineering as our design consultant firm. And I will hand it over to our transportation engineer, project manager from HDR, Paul Molina.
Thank you, Bridget. I appreciate that. Once again, my name is Paul Molina. I'm the transportation engineer for the San Pedro Widening project. We're going to run through a few things tonight, but a quick agenda breakdown. We'll start with the schedule, explain where we started, where we're at now, and where we hope to be in the future. I'm going to run through the project limits and give you a view of a basic vicinity map so you can get an idea of where the project shall occur. We'll then get a little deeper into it and go into the project description, explain the study phase that has occurred, and then we'll go further into the design phase. As Bryce mentioned earlier, we'll have a Q&A session at the end, so we'll explain how to do that when we get there. So starting with the schedule for the San Pedro Widening project, we started the study phase late 2020 and it continued through early 2021. The study phase included an alternative analysis where we reviewed different potential corridor layouts and potential solutions to improve the corridor. Following the study phase, we get into the design phase. And like I said, I'll get into more detail on the design phase as well as the study phase, and we'll talk about what considerations occurred and what decisions were made in order to move those design considerations into the design phase. We're currently in the preliminary design review phase with about a 60 to 90% design. And so now in 2022, we're hoping to move forward to a final design phase after we get some public input and continue with the design process and roll into final design end of the year, early 2023. Construction is anticipated late 2023 to early 2024. So this is the project limits and vicinity map for the San Pedro project. The project spans about a little over a half mile, starting at Carmel Avenue and spanning north along San Pedro Drive to Alameda Blvd. There are a few other intersections between those, including Anaheim Avenue, Corona Avenue, Wilshire Avenue, and Signal Avenue. This project is located just north of Paseo del Norte. So the overall project description and the corridor improvements that we're proposing for this project include full depth roadway reconstruction, new sidewalk, reconstruction of existing curb ramps and drive pads, modification to the existing storm drain infrastructure, as well as new storm drain infrastructure, new lighting, ADA, and pro-RAB improvements. We also did several considerations for pedestrian and bicyclist access improvements. These improvements include ADA ProHat compliant sidewalk, drive pads, and curb ramps. Improvements also included buffered bike lanes where feasible, as well as bike lanes throughout the corridor, new lighting, signing and striping for both pedestrians and bicyclists. So as I previously mentioned, this project went through a study phase late 2021 and through the beginning of this year. The goal of the study phase was to determine a preferred corridor improvement alternative, which addresses the existing corridor deficiencies. This includes deficiencies for both the transit vehicular, and pedestrian and bicyclists that use the corridor. So the primary deficiencies identified during the study phase were primarily the following. The existing San Pedro Drive corridor deficiencies include multimodal safety concerns, those being bicyclists using the roadway that vehicles are using, pedestrians traveling through the roadway, etc. There was non-compliant ADA and PROAG infrastructure throughout the corridor as well. Minimal sidewalk connectivity, lack of bike lanes, and various drainage deficiencies. There is a few small swaths of sidewalk that's out there right now. Many of those swaths of sidewalk are not ADA PROAG compliant. Additionally, there are a lot of areas that don't have any sidewalk at all, so pedestrians are forced to use the roadway or walk through unpaved areas in order to get from A to B. The current layout currently has no bike lanes, and as I mentioned, had drainage deficiencies. There is existing drainage infrastructure through part of the corridor, however, not through the entire segment. So we are improving the existing drainage infrastructure where as feasible, as well as adding some new drainage infrastructure throughout. As I mentioned before, there's also some lighting deficiencies as well. The study phase, what it boiled down to two alternatives. Alternative one consisted of a 2-lane corridor, similar to what you see out there today. That is one northbound lane and one southbound lane. The second alternative considered was a widening, which added an additional lane in each direction, combining for 4 lanes total, 2 northbound and 2 southbound. So this is a plan or aerial view, as well as a schematic drawing of each of the 2 alternatives. This one happens to be the study phase alternative A, 2 lanes. So as I mentioned, this alternative includes a 1 northbound lane and 1 southbound lane in each direction. This alternative also includes raised median to separate the northbound and southbound movements. If you look, you can also see that this alternative also has sidewalk and buffered bike lanes included where feasible. Bike lanes are throughout the corridor, however, buffered bike lanes are where feasible. So this span right here is starting at Carmel Avenue and it spans north. There's a break line right here, but I'm going to go to the next page and you can see how it ties into Alameda Boulevard. This is crossing through Wilshire Avenue, through Signal Avenue, and this is where it ties into Alameda Boulevard. Next couple of slides are going to be the 4-lane corridor. As I mentioned, the 4-lane corridor actually provides 2 lanes in each direction for a combined total of 4 lanes. In lieu of a raised median due to space limitations, a 2-way left turn is provided along through the center. Like the 2-lane alternative, this one starts at Carmel Avenue, spans north, and travels to Alameda Boulevard. Now I'm going to quickly run through just a summary of what the study phase results yielded. For alternative 1, which was the 2-lane corridor, there were various pros that came out with that alternative. First of all, it was a smaller footprint. It required less right-of-way or less acquisition of property outside of the city right-of-way. It also had a we also did a traffic analysis during that time, and the 2-lane corridor showed a significant crash reduction when compared to the 4-lane corridor due to the raised median, which separated traffic from northbound and southbound. The alternative 1, 2-lane corridor also provided less demand on storm drain systems. That being, there not being as much asphalt or pavement surfaces draining to the storm drain system. Due to not having 2 more due to not having additional traffic lanes, it provides space for some bike lanes and some of which include bike lane buffers. Vehicular traffic lanes is the word I was lose space in there for a second, so excuse me if on that. It also provides space for some future landscaping, and overall, alternative one, the 2-lane corridor, had a lower overall cost. Now, when compared to alternative two, the cons are there was a smaller vehicular volume capacity. However, it still meets the 2040 traffic demand. So we do not anticipate any trouble with vehicular demand using the 2-lane alternative. For the 4-lane corridor, it's pretty much just the opposite of everything I mentioned. It did allow for a larger vehicular volume capacity. However, it did require many more right-of-way acquisitions along the corridor, which require time and money, much more money, and as well as some relocations of residents along the corridor. I'm going to back up just one slide right here. And you can actually, I don't know if you guys can see it on your slides, but these shaded red areas or these hashed red areas are actually the area for the sidewalk, which would require a actual right-of-way acquisition. In other words, we would have to extend outside the existing footprint in order to make this happen. There was a smaller crash reduction, that being because there is no raised median going through there. And then there's increased demand on storm drain systems and no room for bike lanes. Having said all that, the preferred alternative that was being moved forward into the design phase was the 2-lane corridor, which is alternative one. Required less right-of-way, greater safety, greater crash reduction ratio, and smaller demand on storm drain infrastructure, additional space for beautification, and it had a overall overcost. And it had wider bike lanes and the ability to provide bike lane buffers at certain locations. So here we are. We get to the design phase, which is the current phase we are in now. The goal of the design phase is to take what we learned from the study phase and actually get it into design. And the typical section for the design phase is 2 10-foot driving lanes, one northbound, one southbound, with a 14-foot raised median separating the two. We also have 5-foot bike lanes throughout the corridor, and 0 to 3 foot buffered bike lanes where feasible. This corridor did not have a constant right of way width that traveled through the corridor. So some areas were wide enough to provide buffered bike lanes. Some areas were too narrow to provide both a bike lane and a buffered bike lane. So we did our best. As a biker, I always preferred to have a little more space with a buffer. So we definitely implemented them where we could. The new design also has new sidewalk with ADA ProWAG compliant pedestrian infrastructure, including continuous sidewalk throughout the corridor. Roadway lighting will also extend throughout the corridor, and storm drain infrastructure improvements will extend through the corridor. That means the sections that did not previously have storm drain inlets and underground conveyance will now have that infrastructure, as well as the proposed roadway topography is being rebuilt in order to channel flows to inlets in lieu of ponding in intersections or being diverted into adjacent properties. That was all a lot of words, but now we have a picture to look at to kind of see what I was describing earlier. I'll kind of step through this moving from the outside in. As I mentioned, here's the existing right-of-way line or delineation between private property and the city corridor. We have 5 to 6 foot sidewalks that span through the corridor, raised curb and gutter, a 5-foot bike lane on both sides of the roadway that spans the duration of the roadway, and then where we could fit it, 0 to 3 foot buffers. We also have 2 driving lanes that are at 10-foot width and a 14-foot median separating the two. Lighting to be provided as well. Great. So we're now going to move into the questions, comments section here. My partner Bryce is going to help me out here, and she will help me describe how best to go about submitting your questions or providing comments, etc. Thank you, Bryce.
Thank you, Paul. Our comment period extends through November 23rd. If you do not wish to provide comments during the meeting tonight, there are a number of other ways that you can provide your questions or comments to the study team. A few of those ways are you can email paul.molina@hdrinc.com, and you could also use send it in the mail to Paul Molina at HDR at 2155 Louisiana Boulevard, NE Suite 3000, Albuquerque, NM 87110-5483. And again, that comment period extends to November 23rd of this month. And if you go to the next slide, I will explain how you can provide comments tonight during the meeting. First off, you can raise your hand to verbally make a statement or ask a question. We ask that you please verbally raise your hand. Here's how to do that. For those of you using WebEx through your internet browser, mobile phone app, or your WebEx desktop app, simply follow the instructions on the screen. If you would like to ask your question or make a statement, you can click the raised hand icon. When you are called, the moderator will unmute your mic and allow you to speak. When you are finished, the moderator will mute your line, and we ask that you lower your hand by clicking on the raised hand icon again. Again, for those joining us online, all these WebEx instructions are showing on your screen. If you are joining by phone as a call-in participant, press *3 if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment. This gives us a hand raise signal when it's your turn to speak. We'll call on you and your line will be unmuted. When you're finished speaking, press *3 again to remove the hand raise signal. And on the next slide, if you have joined us using one of the WebEx applications, you may choose to submit your question or comment in writing using the WebEx Q&A feature. These instructions are displayed on the screen. Remember, if you are joining by phone, press *3 if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment. This gives us a hand raise signal, and when it's your turn to speak, we'll call on you and your line will be unmuted. When you finish speaking, press *3 again to remove the hand raise signal. As a reminder, if you are having technical issues, please contact WebEx help at 866-229-3239. We will do our best to respond to questions in the order that they are received. Please be patient as we may have many questions. If needed, we can extend our meeting time by up to 10 minutes to respond to questions. If we still have outstanding questions at that time, we will respond to written questions as part of the meeting summary and provide to participants via email. For those on the phone, you may submit questions or comments by phone or other methods following the meeting. We will now begin answering questions. All right, and so we will start with the hand raised. I see one by Ralph, so I'm going to request to unmute you, Ralph.
Hi, you can hear me?
We can hear you.
Great. All right. Thank you, Bryce. Thank you, Paul, for the presentation. I've got a pretty good handle on what you're proposing, and I am in favor of the preferred alternative for the reasons you gave. My question has to do with, I guess I'll go ahead and show my face so you can see that I'm not a robot. My question has to do with, so I'm coming from the perspective of the bicycle facilities. And I took note, for 5-foot wide bike lanes, potential for up to 3-foot wide buffers, in some cases, no buffer, which made me then think about the raised median showing as 14 feet. Is that the minimum width allowed for raised medians? That's my first question.
Yes. Go ahead, Paul.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to talk over you there, Bridget. Yes, using the city standards DPM, the minimum width is a 14-foot width minimum median.
Okay, because I was thinking, you know, if you could shave that down to 12 feet, then that could allow for, in some cases, potentially a 1-foot buffer. Okay, so if that's the minimum and you can't have buffer in certain locations, have you guys considered on the outside boundary of the buffer where it's possible and on the outside boundary of the bike lane, using the rumble strips, or have you considered any use of, have you thought about having any portion of this a protected bike lane? And also, have you thought about what you're looking at as maximum speed or speed limit for this corridor? So 3 questions there.
So we wanted to try to limit the amount of right-of-way impacts, especially with going with alternative 1 with that 2-lane. So we kind of used as much right-of-way as possible. So there isn't really anything from those outer edges or limits to pull from to add any additional buffer. And we even kind of narrowed the sidewalks to the minimums that we could really use to help add into that bike lane and that buffer where it fits. And then for the speed limit, that's going to remain the current speed limit out there. We're not going to be changing it at all.
And I'll be honest, I don't know what that speed limit is.
40 miles an hour.
Really? I mean, is this area going to be designated an arterial?
No, it is considered a collector.
So there are currently lots of arterials in, you know, not too far away from this that are 35-mile-an-hour speed limit, such as Lomas, such as Manal. And there are many collectors which are as low as 25 miles an hour. There are several that are 30. There are some that are 35. San Pedro, I mean, that's what we're talking about. But San Pedro also has sections that are 30. So I would encourage you to please think about, you know, you guys are probably aware of the Vision Zero action plan.
Yes.
Okay. Now,
Yes.
all right, and I guess I'm giving comments. I'm not asking questions, but I would just please urge you to look at what are some of the principles of that Vision Zero action plan, and please reconsider 40 miles an hour, or please consider in your scope of work that you can lower that speed limit to be more in line with, you know, you're putting bike lanes on an area on a collector that did not previously have bike lanes. And to think that you can stay with 40 miles an hour just doesn't seem to be congruent with what the goal of the Vision Zero action plan is. All right, I'll leave it to some others for right now, but that'll be a part of my written comments.
Thank you.
We'll discuss with the Vision Zero coordinator, and we'll take a look at the speed limit and see if there's anything we can change.
Okay. All right. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ralph. All right, and now we will move on to, I don't see any other hands raised, so I will move on to the Q&A section. All right, and so we have a couple. They are all from the same individual, Jackie, so I will go through them one by one so that we could just answer each one complete. The first question from Jackie is, how is this being funded?
So this project is currently all locally funded. It's funded through the quarter cent.
All right. And I think this does lead kind of into the second question, which you just answered. What is the estimated construction cost?
Our current construction cost estimate is about $5.5 million.
And he also asked, where can we view the recording of this presentation?
After all of the comments have been compiled and responses have been provided for any additional questions that we can't answer this evening. We're planning to send it to the counselor for them to add to their website.
Perfect. And the last question is, what is a standard / typical / safe driving lane width? I thought it was 12 feet.
Paul, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, so there are various widths depending on what the classification of the roadway is. This happens to be a collector, as I mentioned before, and those widths do vary from 10 to 12 feet. I've also seen some arterials designed at around 11 feet as well. But yeah, 10 to 12 feet is well within current design standards.
And then for those asking questions or attending, would you mind including your name and address in the chat? That way we can document who's asking the question. We can make sure to get any responses out to people.
And then we do have another question from Roy Solomon, and we also have another hand raised. We'll answer Roy Solomon's question first. All right, and so his question is closures, partial and full during the construction period, ?
So the contractor will be required to maintain business access and access to the adjacent streets. I can't really speak to exactly how the contractor is going to prepare their traffic control. However, they are required to maintain access to the public.
Thank you. And I think, and then Jackie did also provide their email and address, so we will take that down. And now we will go over to Ralph, who has requested to speak again.
Yeah, I just wanted to just please note that I have been very diligent in trying to measure the vehicle lane widths on a lot of collectors, even on some arterials, as I've been looking into the standard, or rather perhaps even lack of standard, for bike lanes and vehicle lane widths in the city on collectors and some arterials. And I actually find predominantly, and thank you guys for, I guess thank you the city of Albuquerque for doing this, a lot of them are 10 feet wide. Sometimes 11, sometimes 12, sometimes 15 feet, but those are the exception rather than the rule. I really find that a lot of them are 10 feet. And there's lots of buffer space on either side of the vehicles as they're traveling along with those 10 feet. And I've even measured some that I think are on the realm of 9 to 9.5 feet wide. Okay, that's it. Thanks.
For many roads in the city of Albuquerque, we have to take into account the width of the bus lanes, or the city buses. The minimum driving lanes that they can have are 10.5, but on a 2-lane roadway without any median in the middle to separate the traffic, they need at least 11 feet because they measure 11 feet from mirror to mirror. So we do have to take account bus routes as well.
Okay, thanks.
All right, and those are all the questions in hand raised so far. Again, if anyone would like to ask a question, they could raise their hand or put their comment into the Q&A box, and we can take all those.
If there are no further questions, then I'd like to thank everyone for their time and for joining us this evening and asking your questions, and we'll try to get these over to the counselor and try to get it up on their website as soon as possible. Thank you all for
everyone.
joining us.